Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. A lot of people are leery about working with a financial planner. Our guest today is no different. A lot of people are leery about starting to work with a financial planner. My guest today is no different. We talk about how it's hard to find someone you trust, especially when you don't have friends that are in a position to give you good recommendations because they're not working with planners. So what do you do if you're looking to take your finances to the next level, but you're kind of leery about trying to find a financial planner that's going to be right for you? My answer? Ask questions. All kinds of questions. As many questions as you can think of. This is a service being provided to you. You have the right to ask questions. Ask them, what services do you provide? How do you get paid? Are you a fiduciary? Who's your ideal client? These are just a few questions that you can ask, and the answers are super important. Don't let what you think a financial planner is stop you from reaching out to get expert advice to take your finances to the next level. And of course, I'd be happy if you wanted to interview me. Go to worth-winning.com if you want to set up an appointment. I'm off my soapbox now. Let's get this party started. Did you know that over 75% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck? Well, today's guest, David, is the head of communications at Earnin, a startup that works to help those living paycheck to paycheck avoid paying late fees and providing them with instant access to their paychecks. David doesn't just work at a company that's helping others. He had to figure out how to help himself. When we recorded this, he was celebrating just 10 days of being debt-free, except for his home. This is a huge accomplishment. Today, David's going to share with us how he got into debt and how he worked his way out of it. A few of the things we discuss include the difficulty of being the first person in a family to go to college, how he used his time being deployed by the National Guard to turn his finances around, and what it's like to work for a startup. Let's listen to David share his money memoir. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I love your show, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Well, why don't we start off by providing a little bit of background. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you grew up, and what your first memory of money was.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Boston area, a little town outside of Boston. Came from a working class family. My mom was a waitress, still is a waitress. She's still grinding away. I don't know how she does it. I think my first memory of money was actually a vacation we went on to Ocean City, Maryland. It's a beautiful place, wonderful boardwalk. And my mom gave me $10 for the entire week and said, you can spend this however you want. And if you've ever been to Ocean City or, you know, kind of the boardwalk culture, there's just store after store after store after store. And I spent days walking up and down the boardwalk trying to find something that was worth my precious $10. And I think by the end of the trip, I didn't spend any of it. That's my first memory. I don't know if it's a good or a bad memory, but it's the first memory with money.
What an interesting thing, because you would think on vacation, like everything, the prices ramped up and you could usually only get like one thing for those $10. Instead, you were like, I don't know.
That's exactly it. I could only get one thing and it had to be the thing. And I ended up just buckling, not getting anything. So I say it's a good story to speak to how frugal I am, but it's also a little sad when you can't make those spending decisions when you have the opportunity, right?
Yeah. Would you say that that's kind of like manifested itself in your adult life? The same sort of like, I can't figure out what's worth it, so I spend it on nothing?
Yeah, I actually do feel that way. I'm stubbornly decisive. So if I'm unsure about something, I won't pull the trigger. But if I do know that something will bring value to my life or it's something that I need, I have no buyer's remorse, which is a fantastic thing to have. But sometimes it's a hurdle just trying to get me to buy those things that aren't really needed, but would be kind of nice.
That's interesting. I mean, so much of our childhood does play into who we become as adults, and you seem pretty aware of how that thing was ingrained in you from the very beginning.
Now I do. Going through my 20s, I don't know if that was, I don't know if I had that mindset, but
More to the story.
yeah, yeah.
What about like a piggy bank or an allowance? Was that a regular part of your childhood?
Not really. I'm sure I did have piggy banks. So I had to babysit for my younger brother and sister after school when my mother was working. And she said, all right, you'll get $2 a day for babysitting. And I had a calendar that was just all filled out for months and months and months. And then when I came to her and I said, all right, you now owe me $90. She's like, I was kidding. That's not going to happen. I don't have that type of money to give you.
Wow. You should have collected at the end of every week, huh?
I know. I should have had a better invoicing system. Lessons learned, I guess.
All right. So you had some siblings. How do you remember them interacting with money? Were they kind of the same way as you? Like they couldn't figure out what to do with their $10, or they were opposite? What kind of influences did you have around you and your siblings?
I'm not sure. I can't really speak to their spending habits. What I do know is that they're all in a good spot financially now for the most part. So I imagine a lot of it came from my mother. I don't think it existed at the time, or she didn't know about it, but she had the envelope system, working on tips, all cash. So she was slotting things away for vacations and for school and for sports. And somehow with a meager salary, she was able to give us everything that we needed. And I think that has trickled down to all of us.
And that's really awesome. They said so much of like what we see in the environment we're brought up in manifests itself later on in our lives. So it sounds like, yeah, your mom had really good structure around you guys. Did she also talk to you guys about money?
No, not really. I think it was all lead by example. And now we're kind of on the opposite side of it now, where she's still using an envelope system and we're trying to get her to invest in her retirement and all the things that we've learned since we've become adults and have become even more wise with our finances and how we spend money. We're trying to then now teach her. So the roles have flipped a little bit, but it was a great initial lesson to have.
Yeah, that sounds pretty dope. What about coupons? Was that a part of your upbringing? You talked about being frugal.
Oh, absolutely. I still remember on her days off, she would eat lunch. And I only remember during the summer because we were home from school, but she'd have her ham sandwich and all the flyers out from the Sunday circulars and was just clipping away. And she had her little pouch. I imagine she still has it. I'll have to look into that. But coupons were huge back then. Now everyone has a loyalty card now, so I don't think you have to clip as much as you used to, but it's definitely something I'll follow up on.
Yeah, extreme couponing has gone virtual nowadays. You know, everybody used to wait for their newspaper to come and get, like you said, get their scissors and their clipping going. And now the coupons just come right to your inbox by way of some funnel or marketing, and you can choose to participate or not, and loyalty programs. So couponing has evolved, that's for sure.
Indeed, indeed.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your teenage years. Did you get a job the first time you were able to, or did you have even a childhood job?
As soon as I turned 16, I was working at a McDonald's. That's where high school kids went to work in my town. I also went to go work at the restaurant that she worked at as a dishwasher. Basically, from the age of 16, I've held a couple of jobs. When I got older into high school, about to turn 18, got a job at Toys R Us. Rest in peace, Toys R Us. I miss you.
I know, it's so sad.
But I think having a range of jobs. So dishwasher, working in food service industry. I was actually also an apprentice to my uncle who was a carpenter. I did that for probably 5 months until I realized I couldn't hammer a nail straight and I gave up. And now looking back, I wish I stayed longer because I don't know how to do any home improvement projects.
And it's so expensive to get a handyman for stuff, isn't it?
It is. I'm working on some projects, but it takes me 4 hours to install an electrical outlet now when it probably should only take me about 30 minutes. But doing it safe, taking your time and make sure you do it right is always important.
What was the purpose of those jobs when you turned 16? Was it to help contribute to the household? Was it to save for something in particular? Some people save for college, or was it just to earn money and start having money?
You know, at the time, it was just a spending account for the most part. I think my mother had the home pretty well in check, and I had a car, I had friends, and I wasn't getting any allowance. I wasn't getting anything from her. So making sure I had some money to buy gifts at Christmas and to go out with my friends was important. I remember the first time I actually saved up $1,000 and I was so excited. Yeah, so it was more just kind of personal savings. I didn't really have a goal. I wanted to go to college at the time, but I really didn't have a focus. I didn't have a subject area that I was passionate about. So my financial situation wasn't aimed towards that. It was more just enjoying the time I had.
And so how did you save that $1,000? I think that, most kids in high school, you said you get a job and someone tells you the importance of saving, but did you like put a certain percentage of your check away every time? That shows real discipline as a high school age young adult.
Yeah, I quite frankly, I couldn't tell you.
That's real. Hey, I don't know.
Yeah. One thing is, I never really bought brand name clothing. I never really bought brand name shoes because we couldn't afford it when I was growing up. And then it got to a point where it was almost a point of pride for me when folks were wearing the starter jackets and I just had a Walmart jacket. I was like, I may not be as cool, but at least I didn't blow $100 on that jacket.
Right.
So when I talk about having flexible spending, it was to buy dinner with friends or to grab ice cream or to go to the movies. And quite frankly, when you're working 8 hours a day or however much I was working, the output wasn't overwhelming the input. So I started saving. And then I think it became sort of a game to me. Like when you get to $700, you're like, oh, can I make it to 800? Oh, can I make it to $1,000? So, and $1,000 isn't much by today's standards, but back then I felt pretty accomplished.
Right. As a high school kid, I definitely would have thought I was balling with $1,000 in the bank. It sounds like your values are more oriented toward experiences than, like you said, material things is what you were describing, and wanting to hang out with friends and being able to have food or money to afford the food to do that, or the movies and things like that, versus, like you said, a jacket or something that looks flashy in the moment, but it doesn't provide any experiential value or any fun as it pertains to being around people. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I feel life is all about making memories, right? You're going to experience different things that are going to stick with you throughout your life. And even I look at my budgets now. Now I have a tool like Mint where I can just create budgets, and probably my biggest individual spend is on food, right? Because I'm not a cooker, but I like going out and eating with friends and having a good time. And I'm super frugal in almost every other area. I think my clothing budget's about $20 a month. But when it comes to food, I don't want to feel restricted in that sense because that's what I really enjoy.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so you said that college wasn't really on your radar, so you weren't specifically saving for that. Was there any talk in the household of how that was going to be paid for, or what was going to happen after high school, and what did happen after high school?
I started working at Toys R Us, and that was the plan. No one in my family had gone to college at that point. I was the oldest in my immediate family, but my extended family as well, no one had really gone to college. So I just started working, and I was actually at the town library. I bumped into a military recruiter, and I had been taking community college classes around photography, and I had really enjoyed it. And I started talking with this recruiter, and he said, we have a photojournalist track in the military. You should check it out. So I joined the military. And one, it was because it was a great opportunity to learn something that I always wanted to learn. But then the educational benefits on top of that with the GI Bill and in-state tuition reimbursement, it just made a lot of sense. And it gave me some focus. So I was in boot camp for about 6 months. I came back. I enrolled in college, a local state college, as a communications major with a concentration in photography. And that really got me in the system and got me working hard and got me studying. I wasn't a good student in high school by any stretch of the imagination, but when I found some focus and I had a goal in mind, I knocked it out of the park. And was really joining the military was the catalyst. It was the National Guard. So it was 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and then the rest of the time I devoted to school. And I thought it was a great experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it provided some structure that you were actually in search of almost.
Yeah, when you come from a family that hasn't gone to college, there's really no guidance there. Everyone says you should go to college. It's a good thing to do, but no one really knows step by step how to do it. No one really can demonstrate why it's effective. You hear a lot of things, but unless you have someone who's actually experienced it and is your mentor, it's really, really tough for someone to take these ideas and put them into practice, at least in my mind.
So in the military, the resources that are available, like you said, the GI Bill and things like that, is there somewhere where someone sits you down and they discuss, here's the path to being able to get an education and this is what that looks like? There's resources around that?
Not that I experienced. No, for me, it was just greasing the skid. I suddenly had these great resources. I had a GI Bill. I had tuition assistance to Massachusetts state schools. And it was almost foolish of me not to capitalize on them, right? So it was almost like, well, this is too good to pass up. I'm not going to pass it up. And I kind of went into it blind, but I went into it knowing that there was something that I really enjoyed doing and I wanted to learn more about and excel at. And I think that's what got me over the hump and got me into school. And I think that was the catalyst that my younger siblings needed, because now they all have a 4-year degree. One of my brothers has his master's, but we were really the first family in our large extended family to have everyone go to college.
That's awesome that you got to lead by example and encourage others to do something, like you said, that hadn't been done in your family up to that point. Okay, so in the military, it wasn't necessarily, like you said, like a guidance counselor. It was more like a packet of something that's like, here's these resources. And you're like, wow, look at all these resources. Let me take advantage of them.
Absolutely.
You get into school. Is school completely free, or do you have to cover some of the costs? How does that part work?
No, I still had some student loans. So because I joined the Massachusetts National Guard, I got free tuition at Massachusetts state schools. I also had the GI Bill, but because I was the National Guard, it wasn't the full GI Bill. For some reason, colleges charge all these fees and room and board and all these things that aren't really included in the tuition. So I had some savings from my time at boot camp, and that went to the first few years, but then I had to take out student loans. So I ended up probably getting about $15,000 in student loans. Not a crazy amount, but a significant amount. I was also working while I was in college because I just did not want to be in debt, but it got to the point where it was just inescapable.
Gotcha. All right. So you got a little bit of student loan debt, $15K, but how do you go about getting rid of it?
It was hard. I was working while in college. At the end of the spring semester, I was working all through the summer. And then my senior year, I had the opportunity, well, I guess it's an opportunity. I was deployed to Iraq. So I went to Iraq. I was there for a year. And when you're overseas, I didn't have a family at the time. So they give you, all your room, board, food, everything is paid for. So I was just saving money. And I ended up paying off all my student loans during that year and saving up probably about $20K for when I got back. So it was sort of my piggy bank, I guess.
Yeah, being deployed is a piggy bank. Check that out. Any of the service people that are listening?
Yeah, I would not recommend that as a financial strategy, but it worked out for me.
Different strokes for different folks, but it can be a strategy. It might not be the best strategy, the most recommended, but it can in fact work out.
So I got back and I immediately started working in newspapers as a photojournalist, kind of taking my military experience overseas and with the National Guard and applying it. And I wasn't paid very well at all. It was $13 an hour for a job that required a degree. And that $20K, living in Boston area with high rents, I really started whittling away at that. And then a few years later, we kind of hit the financial crisis, the downturn. I was laid off from that job. And I ended up racking up a ton of credit card debt. And even despite being frugal, despite only eating out at McDonald's, the income just wasn't matching the outgoing. And I ended up running into pretty significant debt on the credit card side.
Did you have a hard time finding work?
Yeah. Like I said, I was working as a newspaper photographer. The newspaper industry just is not a good place right now, even less now than it was before. I know several large newspapers have essentially fired all their photographers and were relying on reporters with iPhones to go out and get the photos that they need for distribution. So at the height of the financial crisis, I am looking at probably the worst industry to look at for photography jobs, and there was just nothing out there. I only had a few years of experience under my belt, and there were photographers with 20 years experience who were in the same predicament. It wasn't a good job market for me. But that said, I didn't give up, right? I was working in fast food. I worked at a fried chicken place in the Boston area. I actually started 2 businesses. One was a sports league in Boston, a softball league, where I got at its height about 50 teams together, and we're playing softball and making good money. I ended up selling that business. And then I became a wedding photographer as well. So on the weekends, would go out, find a beautiful couple, and take a bunch of great photos of them. So that kind of helped me get by, but it just still wasn't enough to cover all the expenses.
Okay, so in thinking about this credit card debt, what was the strategy once you found something different, or did the times change and you started to earn significant enough income to be able to get rid of it, or are you still working on that?
So I decided to shift gears in my career, and I was a photographer. I loved being a photographer, but I just knew there wasn't a future. So I started looking at communications and public relations, and I ended up getting an entry-level job with a publicity firm. The pay was even worse than I had before, but it was stable. When you're a freelancer, doing wedding photography, I would invest a bunch of money into advertising the year prior, and I wouldn't get the returns until the year after. So it was a really, really tough gig to scale. And when you're working part-time, it's the same thing. Hours can be finicky, and it was just really, really tough. So when I got this stable job with the book publicity firm, I knew I had a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, and I was able to really take the time to sit down and budget and figure out, how do I get back? And I had already missed payments on my credit card. I probably had another $10K in debt that I was just trying to juggle and manage between credit cards. It wasn't a great situation. But when I had that stability of pay, even though it was super low, it gave me something to shoot for. And I took what I was expecting to make, I broke it out into different budgets, saw where I had to cut back, and then I just cut back hard, really, really hard.
What were some of the things you got rid of?
Well, food for one, right? I mentioned that. That's my biggest piece of my budget now. I was basically eating ramen every day and living as frugally as I could. We cut the cord with cable. It was $100 a month. That really didn't bring a lot of productivity to my life. I think it was before Netflix turned completely streaming, but I'm not sure. But we cut cable, cut out just as many superfluous expenses that we could. Focused on auto, because I had to get back and forth from work, focused on household bills and a few other things. But it was really cutting down any luxuries to get back on track.
I heard you say we. So now there's a we in the picture at this point.
There was at the time.
Okay.
We's come in and out in life sometimes.
Very much so. Point taken. It sounds like the discipline from the military kind of got you on the point like, okay, I'm on to this new job. I've got some stability. I racked up this debt. So you weren't just out YOLO and having fun. The debt came because you really were having a hard time meeting your regular expenses. And the first opportunity you had, you sat down and said, okay, how do I kick debt in the butt sort of deal?
Absolutely. I had a goal again, right? It's the same thing that got me through college was I had something to focus on. I had an end goal. And when I didn't have a stable job and I was kind of hopping from opportunity to opportunity, I didn't see the future in any of those. But when I got this role, I started getting to the communication side, and I didn't know the path, but I knew there was a path. So it allowed me to really buckle down, focus on what was important, and just trust that my hustle and my talent could take me to the next step.
For sure, for sure. All right, so tell us what happens next in your financial story.
Really, what happened next was I kept working. I kept working really hard. I left jobs as soon as I felt like I had reached the ceiling. And every next step, I garnered a higher wage, got better experience, and really got to the point where I am now. Head of communications here at Earnin, a wonderful startup in the Bay Area. And I think 5-6 years ago, I could never imagine I'd be in this position right now. But there was a lot of hard work that got me there. And there was a lot of tight budgets and a lot of understanding my limitations to get to the point now where I'm out of debt completely, except for a house, which is just something I've bit the bullet on. I'm going to pay a mortgage, but out of debt completely and just saving for my future. I'm so behind not having really a stable, lucrative income for the first 10 years of my professional life. And a lot of millennials are in this position as well. There are folks who don't have a ton saved for retirement. So my goal now is to get myself in a position. There's a term called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And that's sort of my goal. I know what my high-level savings goal is, and I'm driving for that. And if that means cutting back on housing, if that means cutting back on extravagancies, that's where I want to be. I want to be in a point in my life where I have choice, where I can decide what's going to make me the most happy. And getting out of debt was the first step. When you don't have debt, you're not beholden to anyone else. You can really determine what path you want to go down. If I want to work at this job for the next 5 years, I can. If I want to move to Topeka, Kansas for whatever reason, I can. Right now, the ball's in my court.
Yeah. And that's what financial independence is all about. And the first steps to financial independence in any realm of you wanting to achieve that is to create a plan.
Hmm.
And one of the things I really loved about what you just said is like, you have your number. You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask, like, oh, okay, so have you done any number crunching to figure this out? And you're like, I have my savings goal. And such a big part of the FIRE movement is, what does financial independence mean to you? It's customized for each and every person. Some people are trying to retire by 40. Some are trying to do it by 45. Some are just trying to get to a point where they only got to make $20,000 a year and they know that they can make that. And the rest of the money is coming from the investments or the savings that they've set aside. So you've already made a plan, set your goal, you've got that number in mind, and you're working toward it. So I think that's super cool. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about, you were saying that you work at Earnin now, and you mentioned it was a startup. So when some people think startup, they think broke company or out fundraising a lot of money to throw back into the company, and they think of the employees as minimum wage workers. And could you just kind of break down like what it means to be a part of a startup, and do you get good benefits, and is there a retirement plan? And there's so many myths out there about what this thing is, like the new fancy word startup.
Yeah, well, it depends on what your role is at a startup and where you come in. What you described is absolutely true of probably 60, 70% of startups out there. It's a founder with a really great vision, and it takes a lot of hustle by him and a few others to really get that product or service or app off the ground. Where I usually come in, because I'm a communications professional, I usually come in a little bit later. So I'm not a developer, I'm not an engineer, I'm not building these products from the ground up. I come in at a point where we really need to scale and accelerate this. So usually I join a company after they raise a Series B round, which fundraising, like you mentioned, usually comes in a few different steps. There's the seed stage where you have a founder who has a great idea and he just needs a little bit of money to either hire the right people or buy the right equipment to get it off the ground. And then there's a Series A, Series B, Series E. I think Slack just raised a Series H. It can go as far as you want to go. But basically, those are all different steps. So if you can increase the valuation of your startup, make it more attractive to potential investors, you can raise another round to keep the scaling going. So a lot of startups, while they may not be profitable, they are solving a problem that people are passionate about and investors are passionate about, and they see a lot of upside in it. I think when you get to a certain point, and of course in Silicon Valley as well, talent is tough to come by. So it's almost like, would I be a seller or a buyer? It's a market for people like me that have experience and expertise in certain areas. So you can command okay salaries. That said, the Bay Area housing costs are ridiculous and through the roof. So good salaries in the Bay Area really don't mean much because you're throwing that into rent to housing. But if you're frugal like myself and you really good at budgeting, you can actually leave here with a good chunk of change in your bank account. And that's what I'm shooting for.
Cool. And then thinking about how you manage your finances and how you organize things, did you have to do a lot of figuring out? So like you were in the military, they usually have the TSP retirement plan. And then you went on, to, like you said, various other jobs. And now you're currently at Earnin. Who helped you figure out like, oh, okay, this is this retirement plan and you can roll that retirement plan here and these are the benefits and you should take this benefit versus not take that one? Or is that kind of like just a muddled thing that you kind of had to figure out on your own?
It's something that I've had to figure out on my own. And man, I wish there was someone out there who could guide me through this process. It's tough. It's complex. And especially when you're in a position like myself who is making okay money now, but hasn't saved a lot, you don't want to make mistakes. I think you mentioned earlier, most financial advisors, you need $1 million just to garner their attention. So finding folks who have the experience and expertise to help folks who are just starting to get their feet under them is super important.
For sure. And so who are the members of your financial entourage now? Are you a one-man show managing everything for yourself? Have you ever thought about hiring a financial planner? If you haven't, what are the drawbacks or the things that would keep you from doing so?
So I've been really fortunate. I've worked for 2 financial companies. Earnin, our goal with our app is to help people who are living paycheck to paycheck get their pay a little bit earlier. So we have a lot of really bright financial minds here in the office. Prior to this, I was at a company called Realty Shares, which did real estate crowdfunding. So real estate investing. We had folks who worked with investors really, really closely, and I would pick their brains as often as I could. So I've kind of stayed afloat Based on that, maxing out my Roth IRA, if I can, maxing out my 401k. Unfortunately, with the startup, it's typically not matched, but it's still a good vehicle to use. Beyond that, I haven't really had too much guidance.
Gotcha. Do you feel like you could benefit from guidance, or are you just kind of like, meh, I got this, I'll figure it out, or you don't value hiring someone?
Absolutely. I think it's finding the right person, though. And it kind of goes back to my college story. It's like, I knew college was the right thing. I just had no guidance on the best way to approach it. And in retrospect, would I have done it a lot differently? Probably. And with those lessons learned, finding folks who know what they're talking about and have experience is, I think, invaluable. It's tough because it's hard to know who to trust. I come from a working class family, and very few of my family members and friends are in a position where they've hired someone like this. So I'm basically wading into shallow waters here, trying to figure out my path. I think what I would ask a financial advisor would be mostly centered around, I understand that a Roth IRA is important. I understand a 401k is important, but then what to do with that extra income? Do you shoot for high yields? Do you put it away in a conservative vehicle? Is it a mix of the two? And if it is a mix of the two, I have no idea what those mixes are. So I think it would be talking about my position specifically and figuring out what the right mix is for me. When it comes to my home, I actually have an investment property, which it's a beautiful lake house. I would never buy anything in San Francisco because I think the housing prices are insane. We just saw a burnt down property go for $800K in the heart of San Francisco, and I'm good. I'm good with that market. So I bought a property that's about 3 hours away on a lake. It's great. We Airbnb it out. We're making some income off of that. But is that the right way to spend my money? Is it right to have a bunch of capital locked up there? And then finally, I think, is my target right? We talked a little bit about fire. I have a target that I'm shooting for. Is that reasonable, or should I be aiming higher? Could I be aiming lower? If I'm aiming lower, that would be great because that would give me the flexibility to pursue more passion projects. But I really don't know. I kind of put that number on the table based on what I knew at the time. So I'd love to talk through with someone and figure out what is the real number for me and how do I get there?
Yeah, that's dope. And I think one of the things that most people miss out on is they think of a financial planner, or really the word financial advisor, and they're like, oh, some crappy person that's going to sell me insurance and sell me stuff that I don't get. But a real financial planner should address all those sorts of questions. Like you said, am I on the right track?
Right.
How can I optimize this? How can I take my finances to the next level? And I think that's one of the other things is like you get to thinking it's only for rich people or really poor people that need help because they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, no, I've got a really good grip on things, but I want to be better. The same reason that you hire a coach as an athlete. You're a great athlete. You have great potential, or you're great genes, but how do I take this to the next level? And it requires the expertise of someone who spends their time studying it day in, day out. Mm-hmm. So I think those are really valuable questions. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's about being efficient as well. 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. Mm-hmm. And the money that they have in an emergency fund, the little money that they have to put away and invest for their future, it needs to be done right. Because a mistake made when you can least afford to make a mistake can have pretty serious consequences. For me, I don't consider myself living paycheck to paycheck anymore, but I had for a very long time. So the investments that I did make, where I put my money when I had the ability to, was very nerve-wracking for me. So having someone who has been through the process, is experienced, and can offer their guidance, someone who's trustworthy, is invaluable, I really think.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable as well. And you were talking about Earnin being something that is used for people that are living paycheck to paycheck right now. I got to admit, I was a little bit nervous about like, what does he get ready to tie to? Like, we don't want to encourage people to be paycheck to paycheck. So
No.
Break it down for us how Earnin works and why it's good for the person that might be living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, so what Earnin is an app that allows anyone with a job and a bank account to essentially get a cash advance on their pay. I think 66% of Americans are in a 2-week pay cycle. And if it's a Monday and you have a bill to pay and you've already worked a week, but you're not going to get paid until Friday, you you have the possibility of incurring a late fee or getting some type of penalty that could really hurt you. What Earnin does is we verify your employment. We know that you've worked certain hours through the app, and then we will pay you a cash advance based off of that. So if you need $100 on Monday to pay an electric bill, you can go on our app, take that out, and pay off your bill, pay for gas, get to work on time, whatever you need. And then when your pay comes on Friday with your regular schedule, we'll deduct what you deposited in your account earlier. I just think the debt spiral that people can get in is really bad. I was in it. We talked about it earlier, where you start avoiding bills and you start racking up these late fees and credit card fees and hurting your credit score. And I think for the folks who can't raise an emergency fund or are trying to raise it and keep getting set back, it's a good tool to use. It doesn't replace good budgeting. It doesn't replace having a higher income, but it does keep you from getting into a problem that could become more dire without it.
And so in thinking about that, I think like, oh, that's like a payday loan. And payday loans you definitely want to avoid because they come with like 33% interest or something, very ridiculous. So how does Earnin make money and how does that compare? And is there anything that they're doing to educate the person that's living paycheck to paycheck? Are there any resources available to them so that they don't have to be borrowing money on a regular basis?
So Earnin isn't a loan. There's no interest, there's no fees, there's nothing attached to it. We are supported by the tip model. So you can cash out $100 is our daily limit. If you use us a lot, the limit rises to $500, but we don't go any higher than $500 right now because we don't want people to get too deep into trouble. The way we monetize is through the tip model. If you like the service and you want to support someone else, you can pay forward your tip and that will go to someone else who needs to take a deposit early. And I think by financing our app that way, it's an incredibly powerful tool. It keeps us accountable to our customers. If you had the option of choosing how much you'd pay for a product, would you keep paying for that? And that's the approach we have. To stay a viable company, we need to create a product that appeals to our customers, the users, the folks who are in dire straits. And if you like what we're doing, you can support the community and we can continue to grow.
Awesome. That is like music to my ears. I got it. Like you said, I got to admit, I was like, oh, I don't know about this Earnin. Like, how is it different? It's like payday loan at your fingertips. But to hear that you guys are not charging anything and that this is just a way to help that person make that end meet for that time being, and that's at a lower amount so that they can't get into this deep hole of borrowing and giving back and borrowing and giving back. It's good to have some alternatives out there because we know that the people living paycheck to paycheck are the ones that are preyed upon by others, and they deserve better so that they have the best opportunity to get out of that hole.
The scale of the problem is immense. We just did a report that found that 1 out of 8 of our customers who subscribe to streaming services have been overdrafting on those streaming services. These are price points that are $10, $13. A lot of times, our users are already frugal. They've cut cable. They've cut a lot of the extravagancies out of their life. And this is their entertainment, a $10 or $13 app. And they're overdrafting on that because their circumstances are so dire. We want to avoid that. To overdraft on a $10 Netflix charge and then get an additional $35 that they clearly can't afford is something that we absolutely want to avoid and should be avoidable. If employers kind of take up the mantle here and start paying on a more frequent basis, or in the meantime, our app can serve as a tool so people can avoid these fees, we're all for that.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to bridge the gap. We just need to pair it with some sort of like financial education to help these people get more income, because it sounds like you said most of these people are pretty low earners. It's not so much that they're doing a bad job with their budgeting. It's just that there's just not enough to stretch one way or the other.
Absolutely.
And we know that a large part of our population is suffering in that way. There's not enough hours in a day if you're making $7.50 and you live in California to make ends meet.
No, you're absolutely right. And the 3 things that I always preach are start with budgeting and understanding what's coming in, what's coming out. 2, build an emergency fund. I think that is vital so that you don't run into fees like this, that you can handle these financial shocks in a way that, yes, they're a burden, but they're not setting you so far back that you can't get out. And then 3, find a new job. I think people sometimes get comfortable. They don't think that the experience that they are gaining is valuable. But even if you're working at a McDonald's or a Walmart, you're gaining experience there. And if you don't see a path for upward mobility, start leveraging that experience. Start shopping yourself out, because competitors will always pay a little bit more for you than your own company will. At least that's what I've found. And that's why I've sort of hopped jobs a lot, trying to build up from that entry-level communications job to where I am now. It's about being opportunistic, finding the right places to jump, and improving your income, because you can't do anything without the resources.
Resources are key. That was really, really good. I love that. What was it? Your top three, your final three? Dave's three. We're calling it Dave's three.
We need something more catchy than that. We'll have to brand this later.
Right. Exactly. All right. We're headed into what I like to call the final sprint. I'm going to shoot you some rapid fire questions and you give me some rapid fire answers. Are you ready?
I think so.
All right. You got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Tacos. Change that. Pizza. Going pizza.
There's got to be good. California has good tacos. You pick pizza?
Well, yeah. I mean, one, California does have great tacos, which is why I even mentioned it. Two, pizza is the best food ever created, and it doesn't matter where you are.
Carbs are the devil. Okay.
You didn't ask me if I had 200 calories to waste. You said $20, and I'm going pizza.
Good point. It's your final sprint. Who am I to take it over? All right, finish this sentence. That awkward financial moment when?
You swipe your card and it doesn't work.
Oh my goodness, this is frequently the answer. Everyone feels that way.
Because it's the worst. And then you don't know if it's an electronic error or if your bank account's in trouble or you got hacked. Like, there's just so many things go through your mind at a check stand. It's just terrible. Because then you look dumb. You're standing there with so many things going through your mind. The cashier is just like, this happens all the time. Hurry the heck up.
Right. What are you going to do next?
Yeah.
Okay. Worst money habit.
Oh, man. I think it's food. Again, I budget well, but when it comes down to food, I have basically an open-ended budget. It's trying to mix eating well with eating cheaply. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I got to improve it.
I can appreciate how hard that struggle is, eating well with eating cheap. Yes. Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
Everything costs something. I would say it doesn't cost a lot. I love playing sports. I mentioned in Boston, I ran a softball league. Out here in San Francisco, I play soccer, I play softball. I could probably do it for free, but I like the organized aspect. It's super cheap. And every week you get to hang out with your friends and kick the ball around or run around in a field. It's a good time.
Okay. Best advice you've ever received?
I don't know. I don't have anything for that.
All right. And last but not least, can you share with us one thing that you would like to improve about your finances in the upcoming year?
I've gotten myself in a really good position, and I actually became completely debt-free about 10 days ago. So I'm excited about that.
What? So you've been making it sound like this whole episode that this was like 5 years ago, I got my life together. 10 days ago. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, it was all understandable debt, but I finally paid off my car. I'm in a good position. Hey, I'm old. I've lived a long life. I've had a lot of problems in my life.
You're not a baby boomer, for God's sake. Sorry to any baby boomers listening,
For me, it is figuring out the future and getting on the right path. A good position budgeting. I've paid off the last of my credit card debt, and now it's moving forward with investments. I'm behind on my 401k. I'm behind on my Roth IRA, but I have a plan for those. I forgot what the question was, but that's what I'm working on right now.
Right. It was what is one thing you wanted to improve?
One thing I'm still doing is side hustles. It's finding ways to bring in income. I just signed up for an app called Rover, basically dog sitting, and it has been the most fun. Once every other weekend or so, I borrow someone's puppy and I snuggle it and I pet it and they pay me to do it. So that's just a really easy way to make some side cash. I mentioned I have an Airbnb that takes up a lot of my time. Just finding other ways to augment my income so that if anything does happen, we talk about financial shocks and having resources at your disposal. I've been laid off once before. I've been in a rough patch before. If this wonderful job ever happens to dry up, I want to make sure I'm in a position where I have other options.
Awesome. That was really, really good information. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show today. You have made it to the finish line.
Yes.
You have won the race. You are a champion in the eyes of worth listening. You're standing on the podium. This is your time to shine. Shout yourself out. Tell us where we can find you, how we can support you.
Yeah, I want to spread the word about Earnin. This is such a great app. I think our founder is super visionary. He's found a way to push back all the greed in Silicon Valley and build something that's actually for the people. And it's something that I am so proud to support. You can find us at Earnin.com. We're in the App Store for both Apple and Google. And then one thing I'm focusing on, I just joined a little while ago, but it's creating a blog with really great financial content, things that can help folks that are living paycheck to paycheck. The Dave's 3, whatever you and I are going to brand it as, those will be there, but then just tips and tricks to get yourself out of a hole. We're going to have that there as well. So Earnin.com, social media, we're on all the channels as well. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed listening to David's money memoir. David discussed what was necessary for him to take his finances to the next level. A quick recap of his advice. Number 1, budgeting. I know everyone hates the big bad B word, but it is necessary. 2, building an emergency fund. And 3, getting a new job. Dave is a great example of someone that is continuing to improve his financial situation by not becoming complacent in his career. He continues to strive for the next level and the next income that comes along with it while pursuing a career that he's passionate about. His ultimate goal, financial independence. He has his numbers set and a plan in place, but that is still one of the questions he would like to ask a financial planner. Is this number right, and is he on track to get where he wants to go? Our word of the day, payday loans. I do not encourage you to ever use a payday loan. Yes, it gives you access to quick cash, but the APR on one of those things is sometimes around 400%. If money gets tight, you don't have extra to throw away on one of these loans. Borrowing from one of these predatory lenders is like putting a bandaid on a gunshot wound. Don't do it. To avoid ever having to consider borrowing, start by building an emergency fund right now while there's no emergency. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. If you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your own money memoir, please contact us through our website, worth-listening.com.